So welcome back to another episode of Living the Sky Life. I'm so excited to have Mary Barbera back on the podcast. I reached out to Mary because she is an expert in toilet training, potty training, and I get a lot of questions. And I'm very open with everyone that my son Skylar, who's almost 21, has never been toilet trained, not for lack of trying, but and Mary has even helped me at times with my questions. So who better to talk to all of you guys about toilet training than Mary Barbera. So, Mary, would you love to give a little bit of background about yourself and welcome to the podcast again?
Yeah, thank you. We met in person back in the spring
Yeah.
last year. So great to be here. So I started out and I'm going to age myself here, in the 1980s as a registered nurse. And I
Hmm.
always worked in the neuro field, neuro nursing with, people who had strokes and spinal cord injuries and head injuries. And then I moved to rehab where I worked again with those neurologically impaired patients, but I also worked with multidisciplinary teams my whole nursing career, OTs, PTs, speech. And there was a lot of incontinence, bowel, bladder training. And um, so I got very comfortable as I needed to with the whole toilet training. Um, then I moved. I had my kids back to back. They're 18 months apart. Lucas was born in 96. Spencer was born in 97, 18 months apart. And then we noticed that Lucas started to regress, and was diagnosed with moderate to severe autism the day before he was 3, and that's back in 1999. So he was 3. Spencer was, 1.5 when he was diagnosed. And then we started an ABA program in my home, and they were like, well, even though 3 is the golden age for potty training, it seems
Uh-huh.
to be, let's hold off on that. There's a whole lot of things we need to teach Lucas because he was pretty far behind. Even though Lucas, when he was 2, went to typical preschool, never had tantrums, never, had aggression or self-injurious behavior, like was just a very quiet kid in speech therapy. I was in a deep state of denial. So, when he was diagnosed with such moderate to severe autism, and there was a whole lot more, like he was functioning at like a 9 to 12-month-old level for language, and that kind of like hurts when that happens. And then I felt extra guilt for being in denial and all that. So we waited until Lucas was, I think, 4.5, and Spencer was 3, and I potty trained them both at the same time.
Which is helpful,
Um,
I think, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean,
might as
it was
well.
like Spencer was ready, and had I known what I know now about potty training, Lucas could have been potty trained much, much earlier. Um, and now with like, I don't see one-to-one clients anymore. I don't go like door to door. So I transformed from a registered nurse and an overwhelmed mom in denial to a board certified behavior analyst, earned a PhD in leadership, started a podcast, the Turn Autism Around podcast, started online courses in
Written books.
2015. So wrote 2 books. 2007 was my first one. This one, Turn Autism Around. Both books, Verbal Behavior Approach and Turn Autism Around, have whole chapters on potty training. Um, so kind of by default, I became a potty training expert.
Mhm.
Um, and over the years, actually over the decades, so I've been in the autism world for 25 years. And unfortunately, most ABA providers are still using a 1972 book called Potty Training in a Day by Fox and Azrin, which is not written for kids with autism, but it does involve like intense potty training, which isn't always a bad idea, but it also involves, um, having kids in underwear only, letting them pee themselves to experience the error or whatever you're going to call it.
Mhm.
And then it also involves positive practice, which is actually a punishment procedure. And like you take that 1972 approach, which I mean, it was something. That book has sold millions and millions of copies. But as the time changed, oh, another thing the 1972 book says is inspect the underwear, touch the underwear to make sure it's dry, do dry pants checks. Well, now, we're in 2024. Like these things are no longer appropriate.
Right.
And especially when you're talking about older kids in schools, even in ABA centers, you have an older kid in underwear only and you're inspecting no, no. There's, you know, no.
Hard stop.
Yeah, let's think about this, right?
Mhm.
So, so that is how I came upon, all the knowledge. But
Mhm.
and I know you want to specifically talk about older kids and like how to get them potty trained, but like
Or we
is
could start
there
in the beginning and then,
yeah,
like, I just people ask me a lot about Skylar, and I would love for him to be toilet trained. I mean, 20 years of pull-ups is a lot, and I'm tired of it. And I know he's tired of it too. But so I just wanted to know, I guess, when we get to the older part of the discussion, if there's ever kind of a throw your hands up, it's a lost cause, just move on and forget about it, or if people can always be toilet trained. I would assume they can always be toilet trained. But so let's start with
yes.
like the
Yeah.
younger and then just
Well,
kind
well, let's start. It really doesn't matter about the age,
of
okay?
okay.
So, however, you do need to consider the age. Um, Fox and Azrin, I mean, they have not just this potty training in a day, but they were actually behavior analysts. Well, before there was behavior analysts, so I guess they were grandfathered in, but they had PhDs and they were very behavioral. And they also wrote books on how to toilet train 40-year-old men in institutions. So I'm not saying their work is groundbreaking in the 70s. It really was. And my approach is takes a lot of that. It just leaves the punishment, visual inspection, touching underwear at the door, you know. But um they one of their things that I remember, I don't know which book it was in, but over the age of 5, they believe that any child, despite their IQ being very low or their cognitive ability being really low, any child over the age of 5 can be toilet trained. However, if you add in cerebral palsy or a spinal cord injury or Crohn's or, like I know Skylar has some of those issues, right?
Mhm. Yep,
So
yep.
this is for like straight up autism. So I
Mhm,
have personally seen and worked with kids who are 12 and 16 and not toilet trained and don't have those other comorbid conditions. I've also worked with kids with cerebral palsy and autism, and you know, they they're not a lost cause. It's just
mhm,
it's going to take a little bit more individualization and that sort of thing.
mhm,
So, in general, how we start and I have online courses and communities, and so I have a toddler preschooler community for kids under 5, parents and professionals working with them. And then I have an older child, 6 and older course, which really goes very parallel with the toddler course, and that's also for parents and professionals. So with that in mind, um, if somebody fills out an assessment, and I have a one-page assessment in my Turn Autism Around book on page 49, and in the free book resources, but I took that one-page assessment and invested a lot of time and money and created a software. So it's a 10-minute digital assessment. And that's what I would recommend people start with. Whether we're going to dive into potty training,
mhm,
diving into potty training doesn't mean we don't need information about language, language comprehension, the ability to accept reinforcers, the ability to sit at a table. Um, and then we don't also look at problem behaviors like, are they aggressive? Are they self-injurious? Um, how can they touch their body parts on command? And, can they pull up and down their pants? And so when you get the digital assessment, after you do that, it's marybarbera.com/assessment. It's still free. I said it was going to be free for the first 1,000 people. Now it's like 30,000 people have taken it. Still free.
Well,
But
that's
you
nice.
You get then, in your email, after you complete it, you get a two-page printout, which is the one-page printout plus your child's scores. In scores in overall score, and then scores in self-care, which includes potty, language and learning, including imitation and social abilities, and then a score in problem behaviors. And the goal is to get the scores up wherever you start,
Mhm,
and to use this assessment to make a plan. So, in terms of their strengths and needs. So when parents of toddlers come in and their kid is 18 months old or 2 years old, 2.1 month old, and they say they're not potty trained, well, they don't need to be potty trained, right? That's not like huge, it shouldn't be a huge goal or a huge anything.
mhm,
Um, but if somebody, because, they're also not speaking or they're doing this and they can't, hand wash and things like that. So I think it's a whole lot easier to get kids to do like wash their hands independently or more independently because you can provide general prompts from behind, and help the child to make it fun and stuff. It's hard to prompt from behind when the child is sitting on a toilet or a
mhm,
potty. So, there are some skills, like if the child is not sitting at a table to eat or sitting at a table to do matching task, then they might not be able to sit on a toilet for 2 or 5 minutes. So, just generally looking at like the whole picture. And now that I mean, I haven't seen results from 30,000 people, but I mean, I've done some data analysis on some of the groups, and it's almost like reading an EKG for physicians, like if you tell me, Tyler's score is a 45% overall, his self-care, because he's not potty trained, he doesn't dress himself. I'm just saying maybe this
mhm.
is the case. His score in that area would be probably in the 20s or 30s. Maybe his language, if he's not speaking and everything. And this isn't like, "Oh, make you feel bad." This is just like, it is what it is. Like, and maybe his problem behaviors are not as bad or whatever. So maybe his score in that area is 60%. It doesn't matter what the scores are so much as what's on the digital assessment that you can say, "That's a strength, that's a need." Like, he can sit all day and do puzzles, but he, you know and he can sit on the toilet, he just doesn't go, like, those kind of things. It's almost like you have to be a detective to find
Yeah,
out your starting point. So, the digital assessments first, and then, based on age and also family priorities, like, I had this little girl who had just turned 3. And mom was all about potty training because she wasn't able to move up to the preschool class. She had to
right.
pay another fee because she wasn't potty trained. Like, to them, it was a bigger deal than to some other families. So we made that part of the plan. And um I have, videos that I share of this little girl like sitting in the kitchen, um, at a table and chairs, like the little table and chairs, doing matching and labeling things, and she was sitting in her underwear only. Like, that's not inappropriate for a 3-year-old in her kitchen because we have a linoleum tile. Like, we are taking her, like, on a schedule, we're providing reinforcement and everything, but, like, that would not, in my opinion, be in any way appropriate at a school. Maybe an ABA school if you have a very private area where other students aren't going to, see an older child in underwear only. Um, so so age is a factor, but like for Skylar, I would want to know, has he ever peed or pooped in a toilet? Will he sit? Um, is it that kind of problem? Does he know when he pees or poops? Does he stay dry for 2 hours? Like, those are kind of, so you have
Yeah,
to.
it's so funny too because I'm pretty sure that the method you were talking about earlier is what they have done with him over the years at his ABA programs and stuff. And I mean, it was like every 10 to 15 minutes he was going to the bathroom and they had him wash his hands regardless if he went. And they told us only underwear and only clothes, and they're like, we need your commitment that you're gonna wash all these clothes, and like every day send like 5, 6 pairs of pants and stuff for him, and then go wash them every night and send them back. And I mean, we always were 100% in no matter what. We did everything that they asked of us. One of our behavioral therapists even gave us this little device. It was like, I think Tinkle Tunes is what it was called. And it was this little thing that you put in the pull up, and it played music the minute it got wet. So the minute he started to drip pee, and we'd run into the bathroom. But this kid has the amazing ability to, like, I pump him full of orange juice like I did with my daughter, and like all the parenting tricks that I used to know. And he can hold that pee like nobody's business. Even if he has to go, the minute he sits on the toilet, he won't go. And then we pull up his pants and he starts peeing in them. It's the strangest thing. And I know I'm not alone in that. I don't know if
Mhm.
he's afraid of the toilet, if
Yeah.
the sensation of releasing it, that he doesn't think it's okay. But he's been in a pull-up so long now that I'm like, is he just conditioned to that he just pees in his pants? Because that's all he's ever known? I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a
And
mystery.
and a big thing is, you know, if he willingly sits and will sit for, 5 minutes or 10 minutes and, do you have reinforcers going to sit? Do you have additional reinforcers? Like, has he ever peed on in the toilet?
No,
Never.
he hasn't, and the reinforcers is the other issue. There isn't anything that this kid wants. We've
Mm.
taken Elmo away, like, during the day, and we only put Elmo on the iPad to show him when he was in the bathroom, and he could care less. He's like, "Fine, keep it. I don't care." Just like, one mom told me once that her kid loved to push buttons, so they would give him the reward of pushing the garage door up and down, or an elevator button, or things like that, and they got excited and they went. I just
Mm.
can't break through to him, like, about something that he loves. I don't know if you've had clients like that.
I can remember one boy who was like 12, and I went in. I was part of the Verbal Behavior Project in Pennsylvania, which is the Patent Autism Initiative now. But I went into this classroom, and there's 12-year-old, same situation, like, really didn't like a lot of things. He liked, like, sitting on the ball bouncing, but, like, that was it. And so I was trying to brainstorm with the paraprofessionals and the teacher, and I'm like, "Well, does he get excited about anything?" And these 2 aides were like, "Well, but don't tell her, don't tell her." I'm like, "Don't tell me what? What is it?" And they go, "Well, what he really likes is when it rains, he likes, like, people's umbrellas, like, twirling them, but that would never work." And I'm like, "What? That could work. We could get a little umbrella, a travel umbrella, and then if he pees, pop it up, spin it around, like, that's great." Like, so,
Yeah.
you know, um, I mean, it could be really simple. Like, I remember one of the times Lucas pooped on the potty for the first time. I mean, he was peeing, but he wasn't pooping. I was like, "Poop on the potty, we're gonna go drive through McDonald's for fries." You know what I mean? Like, and he
Yeah.
pooped, and in the car, drive through,
Yeah.
Spencer, my typically developing son, he wanted to play hide and seek when I was potty training them. And I'm like, "Okay, poop on the potty, I'll play hide and seek." And that was
Mhm.
it. Like, so,
Mm.
you know, I think for a kid like Skylar, and it was probably very punishing in the beginning, of punishing for
Mhm.
him, punishing for you, washing clothes, like, that doesn't make sense. You don't have to take away the pull-ups to work on potty training.
Yeah.
Um, there are 2 reflexes I talk about in both my books, um, the orthocolic reflex and the gastrocolic reflex. Those are for poop, but you're more likely to poop in the first thing in the morning when you wake up, and especially if your diaper's dry. Like,
Mhm.
is his diaper dry
Oh my
overnight?
gosh, no. I
No,
mean,
soaking wet.
he goes through the pull-up, which is a men's Depends now because he's older. Um, a waterproof pull-up, like, over it, the plasticky kind, then his pajama pants, the sheets, the mattress, the waterproof mattress cover. Every morning, Josh gives him a shower and I strip the bed and we do laundry every single morning. He pees on
Mm.
pillows and blankets and all of it every single day. I mean, this thing weighs 5 pounds when we take it off of him. It's amazing how much
What is
pee.
he drinking at night?
We stop at 5 o'clock too. He just has water because of his diet. He can only have water, and he eats or drinks water with dinner, and it's around 5 o'clock, and that's all he has. We've cut him off, but that's what happens. And I mean, we had him on death roll at one point, and then that didn't really do anything. It's just I don't know where he stores it all, and then he's
Yeah.
obviously comfortable
And
in
he's
his
a
sleep.
thin
He
kid.
releases
It's
it.
not like he's got
Mm-mm.
water
He's fine.
retention issues. That's
Yeah, I know. I
that
mean,
sounds very
scary. It is.
to have that much. I have heard about putting like maxi pads inside of diapers
Mhm.
for extra absorption. Um, yeah, that sounds difficult. And I would really work hard to be like, then so the gastrocolic reflex is after you eat. Um, any The other thing I would look at, and I know he's got Crohn's, and like,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily about Skylar's potty training because he does have unusual things,
Yep. Mhm.
but does he poop every day, multiple times a day?
We're getting to finally regulating his diet. We're getting to, daily, but he'll go 3 or 4 days of constipation, which is something we're, addressing. The one positive though that you said earlier that we've noticed is that in the last couple years, if he goes at all in his pull-up, if he pees at all, he will come and get us or his teacher, his RBTs or whatever, and he will take them to the bathroom. Like he doesn't like to be wet. And those pull-ups absorb a lot. So it's not like he feels it, but he knows he went. So that's a
Okay.
huge win, I feel like. He doesn't
Yeah.
like to have any of that in there. And of course, if he poops, he definitely comes and gets us, um,
Yeah.
and
But
wants
at night
he sleeps right through it. I
yeah.
mean,
So
and
there
he wakes
are
up early if he's really cold and really soaked.
so
So
in the Fox and Azrin books that are for I think the book is in the '70s, it's called, like, Toilet Training the Mentally
mhm,
Retarded, it's just like an old
terrible.
name, old
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but it does have some good like, they would recommend, like, an alarm for the bed, so as soon as he peed or an alarm that goes in his pull-up.
That's what that
So
toy or
yeah,
tinkle
yeah,
thing was,
yeah,
but we couldn't hear it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing is it's great that he's down to, like, 1 time a day, but it's not great that
Oh
um,
yeah.
he's holding poop, so there is a really good MD, he's a urologist, which should mean he's a pee doctor,
Mhm.
a pediatric urologist, and I interviewed him on my podcast, so you can always search Mary Barbera plus the topic, so his name is Dr. Stephen Hodges. Um, and I found him in 2011 when he wrote this book called It's No Accident, which is really good. And it talks about, I think, alarms. It talks about enemas to evacuate the
Mhm.
bowel, um, like once a day to get them regular. It talks about Miralax, which isn't great.
Yeah.
But there are like more natural fiber supplements that can get things under control. But in this book, he talks about a clinic he has down in North Carolina, I believe, and this isn't for kids with autism. This is for kids with pee and poop problems, and they bring them down, and they're having a lot of pee problems. They're either holding their pee, or they're having massive accidents, or going multiple times a day. And he asks on the sheet, is your child constipated? And 90% of the people say no, but they all are constipated. Like
Hmm.
by x-ray, they're full of stool.
Mhm.
So in addition to like fiber supplements, and I can like send you some to post, but like flaxseed, sprinkle that in
Mhm.
his
Yep.
food and that sort of thing. Um, so he wrote this book in 2011 after I wrote, I think, my newest book. I talked about him with this book, but some of my members in my community found that he had written 2 other books called The Mop and The Pre-Mop. Okay, so the mop book and the pre-mop book, and it's how to resolve constipation in babies and toddlers and overcome potty training struggles. That's pre-mop. And then the mop is the proven way to stop bedwetting and accidents in toddlers through teens.
Okay.
So that might be a really good book. And he also has a paid Facebook group for any child of any age that is struggling. So like if I was struggling with toilet training, some of my members have jumped over there and added that. It's not expensive at all. And it's bedwettingandaccidents.com, I think is the website to join that.
Those are good
Um,
resources for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I really and that podcast interview is excellent. It's on constipation and autism and in general, lots of kids are constipated because of our
Mhm.
Western diet and the push to potty train early. And so I don't believe in intensive potty training early, but I do believe, especially when you're talking about a child with signs of autism or with or without a diagnosis, that it doesn't help the situation to just bring out the potty when they're 3.5 or 4. It helps to make it a part of their bedtime, bath time routine, and first thing in the morning, like I used to make a jingle up, first thing in the morning when we wake up, we go pee pee on the potty. Whether their diaper is wet or dry,
Yeah.
they don't get in the shower. They go and sit on the toilet. Before a shower at night or a bath at night, you sit on the toilet. Before a long car ride, or if he dribbles a little bit in his pull up and wants to be changed, but it's not that much, okay, you sit on the toilet, and then we help you get your new. Um, so that's one thing I would do is make sitting on the toilet a very regular thing. And if you can figure out when he does poop the most, like maybe after dinner or something, because of that
Yeah, the
gastric
school
line.
keeps detailed records, so I have a pretty good idea. It's like
Okay, so
2:30 every day.
what time?
It's like 2:30 every day.
Okay. So then at like 2:15, I would say from 2:15 until, 2:30 or 2:20
Mhm,
to 2:35. Like the routine is you sit on the toilet, like
mhm,
before you get a new pull up or around that time. And on the iPad and stuff, you can watch, we go poop in the toilet, and you can read books, you can watch videos on that.
mhm.
Um and it's no pressure, there's no punishment. Um you know, there's just major reinforcement for just sitting.
Mhm.
And then there's major reinforcement for even those like squatty potties, those step
Mhm.
stool things. Do you have
We have
those at
one.
home?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have
At
one.
home and at school. Make sure they have a step stool. Make sure kids' legs are not dangling. So just a little bit more like for everybody here. So we
Yeah.
we want to do that digital assessment, and then we want to dive into potty training. Like, have you started? Have you had many false starts? Has he ever peed or poop on the toilet? Oh, he'll pee, but he asks for a diaper to poop, or he'll pee, but at nighttime like there's just so many variables. And
Mhm.
that's where, like, our community, we talk about potty training a fair amount, but we also talk about talking and receptive language and tantrums and problem
Mhm.
behaviors. And because it's not in isolation, like it may be your biggest struggle with Skylar right now. It might not be. It might be you're kind of, you know, in order for it to be 21 years of no success to success, there's gonna have to be a lot of effort and a lot of planning for that. So I think, the books and everything, um, and I would keep pull-ups on, um, I would probably keep pants on, and like, as a mom, you could have him pull down, he is telling you that he went, he's motioning, which is great. Get VMs to 1 or 2 times per day, if possible. If they are going, 2, 3, 4 days, if they are, when they do have a bowel movement, it's huge bowel movement, like if they're a toddler. I remember parents used to send me, like, pictures of these
Yeah.
full bowel movements in the toilet, like, "Oh, I'm so proud this 2-year-old just produced bowel movements that look like mine," and I'm like, "That's I didn't know that that was bad, but that actually means they're holding."
Yeah, that's
So, you know, you want it to be consistency of, like, sweet mashed potatoes,
yep,
not necessarily even formed, but
look
if
up
it
the
is
Bristol stool
formed,
scale.
it
That's the
they're
we have it on all our
actually
mirrors.
in yeah, in the,
Mhm,
It's No Accident book, and probably in the MOPS book, there's grades of how to assess obviously little balls of hard stool are constipation.
mhm.
But even if you don't think they're constipated, unless they're going 1 to 2 times a day and it's soft like mashed potatoes, it's probably constipation is
Mhm.
making is leaning up against the bladder and making them have bladder problems too, and they're
Yep.
holding the whole thing. Um, And then if there's a current potty schedule and if you have any data. So if just say, Lori, that you're gonna start something, you're gonna try to get something out in the toilet. And
Mhm.
you have to think about like what kind of reinforcers. I know it's tough. Um, but think out of the box like I did with
Yep.
the umbrella and dollar store toys in a bag, or I also have a calendar data system. So if you Google Mary Barbera calendar data, so if you're gonna start like 3 times a day he's gonna sit on the toilet. School's gonna sit him on without going to underwear. Like, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
drastic. It can't be drastic. I mean, it's just punishing. Like, I've heard stories over the years as a behavior
Yeah.
analyst that I'm like, "Oh, well, we send home the underwear filled with poop in a bag." I'm like, "In the backpack." I'm like,
Yeah.
"What are you doing?" Like, that is so punishing. It's so E. coli and stool are one of the most, you
It's
know,
humiliating for the
that
kid too.
it's humiliating for the kids. Like, what are you doing? Stop the nonsense.
Right.
Um, and then we also, from the digital assessment, you'll get like, what is the form of communication? Even Lucas, who was verbal, we did do like a PEX card on the table. And I've tried this with other clients over the years where, the alarm would ring, which means it's time to go to the bathroom. And Lucas would learn to pick the card up and bring it to an adult or hand it to an adult or carry the card to the door of the bathroom. Just something to kind of have the potty in sight, especially if you're going to use a regular toilet, which
Mhm.
I obviously would use for anybody older than, 5 or 6. You're not going to use a little tiny potty. And
Yeah.
I used to always recommend a little tiny potty for little kids, but lately it's like that's another step.
Mhm.
And um so there are like contraptions where you can get with steps and but I like if you are going to use a little potty for little boys or girls, but we have a lot more boys than girls. You have to make sure that they sit deep enough that they're not spraying pee all over the place. Whether it's a toilet or a seat, they have to sit pretty deep so that they're not spraying and making a mess
Mhm.
while they're potty training. And then also like, wear pull-ups or diapers when you're in car seats or when you're in bed or when you're on the sofa, because that can be a real mess.
Mhm.
Um, and I also don't believe that it has to be like, we're doing potty training this week or this month. It can be, we're doing potty training, like we're pairing up the potty. It's 5 times a day. It's on the hour at school and at home with a pull-up. It's it doesn't have to be all or nothing, or we're only doing it from 9 to 12 when there's a therapist at home with mom, and we're doing table time in the kitchen. Like, there just needs to be a plan that makes sense for the family.
That's what I was gonna
But
ask you too,
yeah.
if like, if you should not set a rigid time frame for when this, because we don't do it for anything else with our kids, like, you're gonna be speaking by,
Right.
such age, and you throw everything into it, because then they resent it, and they definitely don't wanna do it. But so if that's okay to, like, do a window, like 9 to 12, and we're gonna do it for the next 3 months or 4 months, however long it takes,
Or
and to get
even we're
the child
gonna do
back
it
into a
for a
rhythm.
week and
Yeah.
see. Let the data, let the child's behavior, like, we also wanna make the bathroom, like, a super fun, relaxing
Mhm,
place, maybe a special light, maybe music, maybe a device, maybe special books, a squatty potty, stool, or at least a step stool so that their feet are actually more in a squatting position. Well, and that's what Lucas was potty trained for pee for like 6 months, and I didn't know all this stuff. So I had him in underwear, and then he'd go behind the sofa and poop and squat. And um, so the first couple times he pooped, I actually held him. He was 5, and he squatted on the toilet and went. So we really have to get them into more of a squatting position.
mhm,
Um, and for adults with the squatty potty, that is key. The other thing
mhm.
you might want to do is teach Skylar and other kids that have peed in diapers for years is maybe they learn to go into the bathroom to pee. Um, could he even sit on the potty with his or sit on the toilet with his pull up or
He
diaper
does
on?
that. Yep.
Oh, he
He'll go
does?
in there. He takes us to the bathroom. He'll go in there. And I'm like, well, if you have to go to the bathroom, have a seat. And he's fully clothed and everything. And he'll sit down, but he pops right back up. His is a staying situation. Like he just won't stay. He just is up and down, up and down. Um, but what's interesting is he sits on the toilet to brush his for me to brush his teeth and help him with his teeth. He sits instead of stands. And then every single night, before his shower, he sits on the toilet while the water is getting warm and I'm just talking to him and whatever in there, and he always sits on the toilet to put his lotion on. Well, I put his lotion on, he sits there.
Mhm.
It's so interesting. It's like when he knows that we're sitting there for the purpose of using the toilet for its intended purpose, he's like, "Nope." He's up on his feet, and I that's why I feel like if he could tell me, I feel like he's afraid. Like, he's just afraid to put his urine and his BMs in there. Like, I don't know. And we flush it, and we pretend like he went, and to give him the sensation, we have him, wash his hands and whatever, but
There's
I don't
also a in the bathroom method where you just literally stay in the bathroom
know.
for a week and he
That's
sits a
hard.
lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot. Or you have, a well, how does he sit for like meals or at table time?
He sits great because we have a bench like in a restaurant. We just kind of mirror that. He can sit. We just have to break through to him.
And I
Um,
think it's really about reinforcement and getting
mhm,
some new reinforcements
yeah.
um so you know that's what I would do is look at his reinforcers, like
Mhm.
maybe you do lotion 3 times a day and he
Yeah.
sits
He
there
could use it.
and you know what I mean like we're
Yeah.
gonna do lotion time
I
again.
never thought of that. That's a good
And
idea.
you know visual timers, you staying in the room with him and singing or watching something on an iPad.
Mhm.
um uh and
Mary, I
Lucas.
was gonna ask you just that for the listeners too. Like, so you said, it's just kind of watching their mannerisms and how they're taking to, starting the toilet training process and stuff. Are you a fan of like if you're just recognizing that after a week or two that your child is just not wanting to do it or not connecting the dots with it, is it okay to stop and start like again another time and revisit it, or are you confusing them when you try too many times a toilet training protocol? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and that's where I was saying, like, the calendar data, and I don't think I
Hmm.
finished that, but, like, say the plan is now that you're gonna put lotion on him 3 times a day,
Hmm.
and while he sits, and you're gonna try to have a visual timer, and you're gonna have some music playing or whatever, and you're gonna talk to him about, "You don't have to poop, you just have to sit here with no diaper on," like, or even with a diaper on. Can he
Mhm.
sit and poop with a diaper? Because if he could sit and poop with a diaper or pee with a diaper, then you could start to cut holes in it and like I mean, I personally never had to go that far,
Yeah.
but um just to teach kids like kids that want to pull up to poop but are pee trained, like, you can start giving it to them, but they can't wander around the house. Like, you need to poop here, you need to
Mhm.
stay in the bathroom. You need to help clean up. You need to, but then also be like, okay, you have to sit down with it for 5 minutes. Or you need to sit down and then I'll give you the diaper to poop. Like, I don't think I would do anything for even a week without maybe analyzing. And I also wouldn't be like, "Okay, forget it. We're gonna try in 3 months." I would just let the data, like, right in here, what you're doing. Okay, he's sitting, he's tolerating the lotion, there's no pee or poop, there's um, and but we never wanna force a child to sit.
Mhm.
We never wanna put unneeded pressure on to do anything in the toilet, but we need to raise the reinforcement super high if they sit. And for some kids, just sitting on the toilet with nothing on, like no, you know,
Mhm.
diaper or pull-up on is really the battle. And it can't be a battle. It's gotta be that's what you're working on. And there's never like I wouldn't, like, stop. I would
Okay.
I would just learn more. I would read that mop book. I would I would invest in a timer. I would do something to just because you tried the tinkle thing, years ago, doesn't mean that that couldn't work now because now he can feel it, and if he knows he's gonna get something really special, if he goes a little bit,
Okay.
like, for him, it might just be the connection you need.
Okay. Yeah, I just always wondered about that, about stopping and starting, and if it gets confusing for kids because they're like, I just always worried that because we did those invasive, methods before, and then it's almost like he won. And I know it wasn't a competition or a battle. Our hands up, we're like, okay, we can't keep every 10 minutes and doing this for day after
No, and
day after day.
I wouldn't take kids every 10 minutes. I mean, you don't
Yeah,
go
and
every
that's
10
what they
minutes.
had us do. And I just feel like
I
he
would
gave
take
up.
them 30 minutes max
Mhm.
or even started at 45 minutes
Okay.
or an hour, and then push orange juice or
Right.
whatever his favorite liquid is or popsicles or, like, for some kids, like, 4 ounces of lemonade or and don't, um like, I had this one child who like, for lunch, he would drink, like, 3 pouches of Capri Sun, and then he'd always have an accident right after that.
Yeah.
Like, you want to push fluids, but not, like, crazy amounts. You wanna do 4 to 8 ounces of fluids every hour or every 2 hours, so it's especially when you're trying to potty. So, um, don't go nuts. And if you could build in a reinforcer for sitting, okay, you have to sit for 5 minutes, then we get the popsicle. Then an hour later, now we have 4 ounces of fluid in there. Let's sit for another 5 minutes, set a timer. Um,
Yeah.
uh, they have to sit and relax in order to pee or poop,
Right.
but not for like long,
Yes.
long, long times.
Yes.
Okay. Another couple things I wanted to mention is will they sit anywhere at a table or on the toilet? If they won't, then you have to just pair that up and, you know, it may require, like, joining my online course and community and really working on, sitting and attending and being reinforced, like, we want kids to, like, run to the whatever we're doing. We don't call things work. We want them to run to the learning table. We want them run to the bathroom. We want them to run to get a bath. We want them, you know, and if they're not running or walking eagerly, and if they're resisting, we don't have enough reinforcement.
Mhm.
So you might be delivering so much free reinforcement for anything, because you work so hard. And I'm never into punishment, but maybe we need to like be like, okay, we can have breakfast, but first we have to do our morning routine, which
Mhm.
includes 5 minutes of a sit.
That makes
Um,
perfect sense.
yeah, like,
Unlimited reinforcement all the time. That's our
yeah,
house.
yeah, like, you wanna be the spoiling grandmother.
Well, we're just trying to keep him entertained and, like, keep him, busy because he just
Right,
takes so much work, and so I'm like, "You're right." That when you said that, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're doing." He
yeah,
gets everything anyway, so he's like,
right,
"What do I work for? Nothing."
right, and we don't wanna say you're working for, but we want to set it up. There's this thing called the pre-Mac principle. First you eat your peas, then you get dessert. First we wash our hands, and then we can eat a snack. First we sit on the potty, and then we get dressed, and then we get breakfast, or we get 15 minutes on the iPad while mom gets ready. So we want to be building in the schedule
Mhm,
that gets kids to sit for 5 or 10 minutes at a time, especially
mhm,
if they're not peeing. Like when you or I sit on the potty, we pee right away, right? There's not that latency. But for kids who have been resistant, um, so maybe you start lotioning with him, not with a diaper on,
mhm,
like, or when the thing, right, we're gonna sit, and while the water's getting warm, we're gonna try to pee.
mhm,
Um, so it doesn't have to be dollar store toys either. It could be like, I'll play hide and seek with you like I did for Spencer, or we'll get in the car and drive through McDonald's. Like, it can be stuff like that. The other
cool.
thing is that, a lot of the toilet training books and advice is that they need these prerequisite skills of pulling up and down pants and washing hands, and um so I agree somewhat, but like, if your son or anybody listening out there, their child resists hand washing, I do have a free bonus video that's available on YouTube, marybarbera.com/hand washing, I think, or just Google, like I said before. But like, hand washing is a really important skill for a lot of different reasons. So if you have a child of any age that isn't cooperative, or isn't independent, that's something you can work on throughout the day, with making it fun and building up the reinforcement. Um, I have done a lot of work with like hand washing and things like that. There's a good book called Self-Help Skills for People with Autism. It's kind of expensive because it's older, so it's but basically the best part of this book is like a task analysis, which you can make um, on a piece of loose leaf. But basically, you break down the steps of, say, hand washing in 5 words or less. And then on the side of the sheet, you put the date and how independent they are. If they were independent, they needed a verbal prompt, they needed a physical prompt. And we never want to prompt kids. We want to be very gentle with when we physically prompt kids, but we see that with kids that especially that are older with autism, they don't want to be prompted. They get prompt resistant because people are over prompting. So
Mhm,
first you have to make it fun and be silly and that sort of thing, but they need to learn to tolerate gentle physical prompts for a lot of things, for buttoning, for pulling up and down pants, and those are important skills that I cover everywhere in my books, in my courses, and I have a free potty guide which covers a lot of what we're going over today at marybarbera.com/potty. It's 20 pages long. There's so much, but that's the problem. There's so much advice
mhm,
and so much information. And then when you have a child like your son or anybody of the listeners that are still have struggling with potty training, um, even with older kids, it's like y- you get overwhelmed.
mhm.
And so I do think that I have one of the best kind of
Comprehensive,
basic,
yeah. Mhm,
positive, as a nurse, as a mom, as a behavior analyst, like, do not punish your child, punish yourself, make it, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try this for a couple days. And
mhm.
then you might have to tweak it. Okay, we're gonna do the lotion still because he enjoys that, but I'm gonna have him, go back to sitting with his pull-up on there, or I'm gonna take the pull-up off now. Now we're gonna make it a little bit harder now that I know, you're gonna have to be the detective and it's a dance, right?
Mhm.
So it's both an art and a science, but we have to use the science to make the steps. And then we don't just throw everything away. Like, maybe think about like a diet, for instance. Like, I feel like I've been on a diet for,
My whole life, adult
decades.
life.
You know, so it's not like you go like, "Oh, forget it. I'm just gonna eat whatever I want and not exercise for,
Sometimes I do, but
3
yeah, I
months
know
or
what you
3
mean.
years, and then I'll get back at it."
Yeah.
You kinda just keep progressing, and, like,
Mhm.
if something's not working, the scale's not going down, or you're getting GI upset or whatever, you tweak it. You don't just abandon everything.
Right.
So that's what I'm thinking is just, so and then once you do the, digital assessment, I think that'll be a really good start. Read the chapter in my book or at least get the free potty guide. And really the steps are you want to pair or repair sitting on the toilet. Boys who are not bowel movement trained should be sitting, but if you have a boy that's pee trained that asks for the diaper, that refuses to sit to pee, it's okay. Like that happens, right? But if you have a little boy and you're just starting, sit to pee until they're fully bowel trained and fully independent. And Lucas still, he's 27, he still sits to pee
I
everywhere.
know a lot of adult men who sit to pee
Yeah.
just for
So,
randomly.
I tried to like teach him kind of half-heartedly to stand, and then I abandoned that. I'm like, forget it, forget it.
Doesn't really
Um,
matter.
so you have to pair and repair the toilet and
Mhm.
sitting. Um, then it's extra liquids during the time frame you're gonna potty train,
Mhm.
about 4 ounces an hour. Scheduled sits, so either 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or 60 minutes to start. Once they start, going and not having accidents, you can actually stretch out that schedule. You wanna be pairing them to be asking to go or at least, saying, "Oh, it's time to, do our scheduled, toilet." And I'm saying potty just because
Mhm.
I used to call it toilet training, but, in the online space, potty training has, like, 1,000 times more hits than toilet training, but
Mhm.
the same thing. But I would also, if you are doing it with school and home, pick somebody like a toilet training manager who's gonna be, um, kind of the coordinator and, like, involved with the data and involved with what are we doing now. Um, and, yeah, so I would do that. Reinforcement is the next step. You have to reinforce for staying dry, for sitting, for peeing or pooping. And that's gonna have to be individualized and think out of the box. And then finally, you're gonna wanna take data. I think in the 20-page guide, I have a data sheet, also the calendar data sheet. If you're like, until you get pee or poop out, I wouldn't even bother with the toilet training. You know what I mean? Every hour, like, that
Mhm.
would be punishing, right?
Yep.
So, just have a data sheet, or a calendar that, the first time he pees or poops, um, you're gonna mark that in the calendar and, maybe at that point, you go to data sheets once you have some success going. But the calendar data is also good for keeping track of a variety of things.
Right.
Uh, yeah, so that's the basic steps. It really doesn't matter how old the child is. I'm glad that we talked about how to be positive, how to make it a priority without driving yourself nuts.
Yeah, and your child nuts.
Yeah.
No, I think this is so valuable because it is hard to not go, well, we're in the adult years now. It's just not gonna happen and it's fine. It's not fine. I just tell myself that because I don't want to be upset that it just didn't work out for us early on. It's hard to not feel like a failure as a parent that you just could not get that accomplished, but there's still time. He's only 20, So, I
For
mean, it's not like, he's 90
And
and
you might
and he
wanna,
may be back independent at 90, I
even
don't
though
know.
that Fox and Azurin book sounds horrible,
Yeah,
like with the, with the old terminology, there are some things that you could glean. Like, he describes like, I mean, it's very punishing. So you have to go like, okay, we're not gonna do that.
right,
But
it's
that timer, that pad thing, and now
yeah,
with the technology,
steal a
there's
couple
all
ideas.
kinds of things that you can link to your phone and that sort of thing. Um, but the important thing is that it remain positive and
Mhm,
that you don't take steps backwards.
yeah. Well, your resources sound awesome. So thank you for offering all that stuff. I mean, the free videos and the free guides and some of that stuff. And then your books, of course, are great for lots of information, but specific to the chapters on toileting, since we're talking about that. So if you guys haven't checked her out, I'm sure you're all following her probably because I think everybody follows Mary Barbera's social media accounts and stuff. But thank you so much for this.
Yeah,
It's really needed at all the time. It's a great refresher for all of us. So I
that's
appreciate it.
awesome.